Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. This is the Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, William's getting married. Let's go to St. Pete's.
From IFC Films comes the follow-up to the international sensation, L'Auberge Espagnole.
I'm getting married.
No.
Yeah. I found true love. Real love.
Yes, I did. Are you also going to get married?
Maybe.
No. Maybe? Maybe.
Andy, we're back with Cédric Klapisch's film, Russian Dolls.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. Now, this is the follow-up to L'Auberge Espagnole, the Spanish apartment that we watched last week. It was Reality Bites in Spain. and about the kids figuring out what they want to do with their lives. And there were relationships, and there was a lot of sex, and there was intrigue and comedy, and lots of languages spoke. And we both felt pretty strongly about that movie. And this is the follow-up. We follow our friend Xavier. He is now, it's 5 years later, and he is trying to figure out still how to be a grown-up. This is one of the early #adulting movies where he's just trying to figure out how to get along in the world, keep a stable job, figure out a stable relationship, and how neither of us had seen this movie. I want to know how it hit you.
Watching this movie was an interesting experience for me, and the thing that I took away from it mostly was, man, I hope that Cédric is not going to ruin my love of his first film with these next two, because I think he does some interesting things here, but I feel like this was an opportunity to kind of revisit these people, but not in a way that was satisfying in any way. I really questioned what the point of this film was, and why we needed to pick up with Xavier and friends at this particular moment. So it was a bit more of a struggle for me.
I was worried about exactly that watching this movie, that this is a movie that we really should have just left at a single atomic entity, that it was a gratifying exploration of this year in these people's lives, and that exploring beyond that just becomes a drudge. I struggled to get into this movie. It takes a long time to pick up, and it actually opens beautifully, and it sets up with Xavier on a train, and he's writing, and he sets up the narrative that he's going to tell us a story. He's not going to tell us the story in order, so that's kind of a fun play on narrative structure. So that starts on the train and then starts jumping through time. We do see some of those fun kind of editorial tricks, speeding up time. It was done again, not quite as masterfully as I think they did in the first movie, but they did play a little bit with that stuff in this movie. And then what is it? It's kind of him figuring out how to be with women. And frankly, Andy, he is not as likable a guy in this movie as he was in the last movie. I just didn't like him that much.
It was very frustrating, and it made me, what happened was it brought up elements in Xavier as a person that I think some of them are there in the first film, but because he's so lost in that first film, in everything else and trying to figure himself out and what he's going to do with his life, he's a lot more likable here. He's pursuing his career. He's followed his dream. It's not the dream that he set out to do. He's not exactly thrilled with it, but he's still doing it. But really, we kind of, I don't know, we end up seeing more of him as a person that we had seen glimpses of, like the way he talks to his mom is always he's always a jerk to his mom. And in the first film, he was too, but I kind of wrote it off as just kind of a quirky thing. And here I just, I was like, God, he's still a jerk to his mom, and I like him less for it. And, he doesn't treat women well, and I like him less for it. And it kind of kept happening. It was very frustrating.
Absolutely agree. And the mom thing, I think, is a really good one to pick out here, because his relationship with his mom, like all she's trying to do is be a good mom to an adult son. And he doesn't really give her a good opportunity to do that, right? And I really struggled with that. In the last movie 5 years earlier, I think you can write it off, at least I did, to the sort of youthful insurrectionism. He's just trying to kind of grow up a little bit. It's 5 years later now, and man, you just be nice to your mother, right?
Yeah, right.
You just
she's
be nice
divorced
to your mother.
Now. She's with a new guy. I mean, be nice to her. She needs that in her life.
Absolutely. So I really struggled with that. And the problem, I think, is magnified by all of these other characters that we loved from the first movie who kind of come back into orbit, and they're all better people than he is. Like, I enjoy every one of them more than my time with Xavier, our protagonist. I even liked William, who was an ass in the last movie. He was the guy we all hated in the last movie because he had no frontal lobe and just said everything that he needed to say when he said it, and was incredibly rude, shockingly rude to a number of people. And we did not like him. I really enjoyed what we get out of him and his redemption, his sort of character redemption, having gone to the trouble, meeting this beautiful ballet dancer from Russia, getting her address that he can't read, and taking a year to learn Russian before he goes to try to find her. It was an extraordinary and romantic effort, and I was so touched by that. I thought it was terrific. Xavier gave us no such grand endeavor. There's nothing that redeemed him in that way.
No, I feel like he's struggling with his writing. He's still writing. He still is successful in some ways. He hasn't written his great novel, but he has, he's writing for kind of a sequel to a TV movie, and he's doing ghostwriting for people's biographies, and there are things that he's doing that involve writing. So he has made a career as a writer. It's just not the novelist, but he's still there. So that's great. I mean, I think that's a success in some ways. But so then what is the story? Is it about him unable to find love? It seems like it's starting to set off. It's weird because the film sets us off where he's back with Martine, Audrey Tauto's character from the first film, but not with her. They're just friends. She has been married, had a kid, and is divorced. And he just kind of befriends her, and they hang out and stuff. And he takes care of her kid when she goes on a trip, et cetera, et cetera. But other than that, he's just like sleeping with women left and right, and doesn't really seem to, find a way to connect at all with anybody. And it's like, what is the film trying to say with that? And I get it. It's okay. So the first one, it was career. This one is love, I guess. But I don't know. His story was a frustrating one. And we do take a long time in setting it up. And I mean, we don't even get to Russia until the first hour of the movie's gone by. And it really kind of, it did take its time. I didn't have as much a problem getting into it because I do think that's one thing that Cédric Klapisch does really interesting is find a way to tell stories in fun and interesting ways. And, in this one, we get those frames and the really cool time jumps and the way that he kind of was blending frames as Xavier was interviewing people, and you'd kind of have one interview and then you'd have these little squares kind of pop up of a different interview, and everything was overlaid and blend really nicely. I thought that was super cool.
Just to jump in on that, I can't let you finish that part of the conversation without bringing up the band in his head when he starts talking about most of
right.
What I do when I'm pitching is just tell stories about just trying to get the job, and other hymns come in playing, a flute and, different instruments and dancing around, right. Behind whoever he's talking to, whatever business associate he's talking to in the interview. And I found that really just a delightful and kind of frivolous, fantastical addition to the story. Makes it very, very playful. And so to your point, I think that is something that helps the opening 45 minutes or so of otherwise a little bit of a slog for me.
Yeah, and some of it works better than others. Like, he has this neighbor that he says is super boring, and he takes that person because it's almost like as a writer, he's kind of dubbed him kind of the average guy. And so when he's writing, he takes that average guy and he puts him into the characters that he's writing. And so you see this neighbor of his in these scenes that he's writing, and it's kind of cute, but it didn't completely land for me. I was like, kind of there, kind of not. One area, actually, I think that Klapisch failed for me on. I thought in the first film, he so brilliantly used all that speed ramping and the fun way to kind of have Xavier moving through the kind of the craziness of the business world. We saw him early in the school when he's kind of going from office to office trying to get his paperwork done. We see that when he's going to this economics finance position, and he's going from office to office talking to people and looking at kind of all the stuff he's going to do. It felt very much a part of kind of the craziness of the way that life ran. And here they do it when all of the friends are reunited at the end, and they're kind of just going around and taking a tour of this Russian apartment that William and his fiance and her family all live in. And it was like it took it out of the context that it had always been used in, and it's still fun, but it's like all of a sudden I'm like, I feel like he's just throwing it in to throw it in now.
Well, and he threw it in a place where, it's arguably one of the most interesting set pieces of the entire movie is to see how these people live together. And I think to apply trickery to it actually deflates what we really needed to get out of that part of the film.
Plus, it's our chance to get connected back with all of these people from the first film. And that's something that was really neglected in this one. By the time everybody comes together for William's wedding, it's like, I feel like they were only there just to kind of throw him in just because, he wanted to reunite them. It didn't feel like an important part of the story.
Well, especially the young woman, the native Barcelonan, right? She was hardly in it at all. She had a little toast at the wedding, and I really liked her part. We had more of characters like Wendy because she becomes a central figure in the film, certainly a central woman in his relationship life, and ends up being kind of where he lands at the end of the film. Were you surprised by that?
I wasn't surprised. I guess I was surprised by the fact that was the direction that they turned it on. But I wasn't surprised by the fact that, hey, this is how lives unfold. These random people that you were connected with for a time, all of a sudden become a hugely critical part in your life, possibly even one of your serious relationships. I thought it made sense when it happened. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can see that.
It surprised me that I guess it was wrapping up. It had been such a kind of whirlwind of him and his relationships and his really poor choices of language with women, and that by the time he kind of landed with Wendy again, it was satisfying because I like Wendy as a character. I enjoyed her, but also I now feel like I've been with Xavier for 4 hours and arguably 6-7 years of his life, and I feel like she needs better than him. Like, I, as an audience member, I know more about him than she does, and I feel like she deserves a more dramatic improvement over the man that she had been with almost immediately before him, and I think she's it made me just say, ugh, you need to make better choices. And that's not a feeling I want when I'm coming out of this romantic movie to say that the protagonist isn't good enough for you at the very end of the film.
Yeah, right. There's a couple interesting scenes that I think relate to that, and I think the main one obviously is when Wendy picks up the phone and sees that this famous person Celia was calling to talk to Xavier because they had connected before he kind of connected with Wendy. But she's in Russia and wants to hook up, and he lies to Wendy and says, "Oh, I've got to go over to Moscow to meet to do this project."
Yeah, new client.
Yeah, and she has this amazing moment when she's saying goodbye to him at the train station about how he's perfect. He's the perfect guy. The reason he's perfect is because all of his imperfections are things that she's totally fallen in love with. This was just a defining speech that was beautiful. It was beautifully done. I loved everything about it. And then it's the defining moment for him too, because he doesn't listen and he walks away and he hops on the train and goes off to this quote job so that he can have this hookup with Celia that turns to nothing because of the type of person she is. And I think that her speech there gave me everything that I needed to find in the connection between the two of them. I think I wanted to see a little bit more of that on the screen, but I think I was okay with their relationship because of that speech and because of everything. Now, yes, I mean, show, don't tell. You want to see all of that sort of stuff unfolding. But on the flip side of that, to your point, there are a lot of horrible things that he does in this film that we don't necessarily like him for. Like, the way that, oh my goodness, the way that he just acted toward women in this, that when he is with Martine and they've connected just as friends, and she had spent the night because she just needed somebody, nothing sexual, just kind of that, that connection of another being. And the next morning she's leaving, and this other girl that he had connected with comes over, and he treats Martine horribly. He treats this other woman horribly. Isabel and all of her friends are there, and they, get on his case. He treats them horribly. I was like happy when one of them punched him, and I was upset that not every one of them punched him. He was like such an ass. Like, where did this turn come from? Where's the justification for this? And then the thing that bothered me throughout the rest of the film is, why was there never any sort of apology, especially with Isabel? I mean, I felt like we needed better closure with that. All of a sudden, they're just talking again, and that really bugged me. And weirdly, I felt like I wanted a kind of a reconciliation with that woman that he was kind of dating and told off. That was just a horrible way to end that.
I got to go back to your point about Wendy's speech, because everything that you just said is unredeemed in the movie, right? To me, for Xavier, like, all of that stuff is unredeemed. We get this shot at the end where Wendy, it's like, this is her final pitch. This is her final, like, you need to be with me thing. I'm giving you a shot. I'm telling you everything. And the next thing you do is going to determine how our relationship proceeds. And what we find out later is that she was expecting him to stay because she knew he had lied, and she was trying to get him to stay with her. And she knew that the next thing, if he stayed on that train, that she was going to walk away a single woman, not in a relationship. And that's exactly what happened. He did not stay. He did not come back and make any sort of grand gesture, any sort of effort to redeem the things that had so far been irredeemable about his behavior toward women, to the one who was most important to him, Wendy, presumably, at the end of the movie, and they still end up together. And I find that math, the calculus, the relationship calculus, just does not add up. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't feel like their relationship is a justified one. And I need to feel that. As much as this movie exists in this meta space about the two of them, Wendy and Xavier, writing this, TV movie script and how they don't want it to be cliche, and yet their meta dialogue about cliche in this movie is all about how, hey, we need some cliche. The cliche exists for a reason. We need people to feel rewarded about their experiences together. I needed more of that at the end of this movie than I got. I needed there to be a rewarding romantic speech, an effort, an endeavor, a grand gesture, something to redeem this character, and I never got it. And that, more than anything else, is making me really nervous about the third movie in this series.
Well, and, to that point, I was also frustrated that Klapisch decided to kind of use their journey as writers on this TV project as the kind of a linchpin, I guess we'd say, for that final speech, because we have on the boat where we see, nothing's working for Xavier. He's all depressed. He's on this boat. It's kind of the wedding reception for William and his bride, and he's standing there depressed. He looks over, he sees Wendy, who's also sad and depressed, and he goes over to her, and delivers all these cliched lines. I love you, I've always loved you. And then it cuts, and he's still standing there, and you realize, oh, this was all just in his head, and he's just like, no, I can't do it that way. And I'm like, oh, okay, so he's going to now, the director, he's going to now use his tools to kind of find the right way to do this. And then he starts again, and he goes at it a different route. And it involves her parents and everything. And I was waiting for them to continue because I was like, well, this isn't that great of a sell. Like, why is this the thing that would sell her? Surely it's not going to be the last one. And we're going to get another turn as he tries to come up with the right way.
Time, please.
Right. And it doesn't. And that's it. And all of a sudden they're back together. I'm like, what? That was their big twist is, a second opportunity, a second journey in his head is the answer. And it really fell flat for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you brought up Isabel. I have to say, the entire Isabel sequence, I did really enjoy. I did not like what it represented in light of the rest of this conversation. It doesn't make him look great. What I'm talking about here is he feels obligated to his uncle that he finds a fiance, or his grandfather, right? That he finds a fiance before, granddad dies. And so he asks Isabel, do you have a dress? She says, why would I have a dress? What good would a dress be for me? Well, she finds a dress. She gets in a dress and she pretends to be, it's the old Three's Company trope. She pretends to be the fiance and they go to dinner and it's a very challenging social interaction, but they make it through. And at this point, he's living with Isabel and kind of sharing her place, and they're kind of rekindling their friendship, and they're doing the things that roommates kind of do with one another. I enjoyed that sequence, and I even enjoyed when all of her friends came over and dressed him up in drag, like they were having such fun at his expense. I needed to have fun at his expense at that point, and I felt great about that sequence. That was a thumbs up for me.
Yeah, I thought so too. And it's just, it's a shame that was followed up by that kind of horrific scene where he, ruins everything with Martine and this other woman that he's dating and all of his, and Isabel and all of her friends. It was strange. And I guess I can see they were trying to do a twist on this kind of soap opera-ish story that he's writing, because it felt very much, like he's got the one girl in the house, the other comes to the door, and it played it up very much like that. But it just, I don't know, it just completely fell apart for me. And yeah, it ruined everything that he was doing with Isabel for me. I thought there was an interesting opportunity to continue that relationship, and certainly at least to give, the actress more to do. And it just wasn't there.
Yeah, because boy, when they're done, she's gone. We don't get any more of her. And we needed her. We needed that energy of that character to continue to meter what we're getting out of Xavier, which is not good. And in fact, the fact that it was kind of this unknown friend of Isabel's who punched him in the face, I think was a missed opportunity, frankly. Yeah. It needed to be Isabel, right?
Right.
She's the one who needed to come up and punch him right smack in the gob.
100%. Yeah, it's a frustrating relationship that we had with Xavier this time, and I don't know, it made the whole film that much more frustrating, because I just don't feel this. Something that we haven't talked about much on the show at all, really, is this whole concept of the male gaze and how a male filmmaker, male storytellers are kind of making a story, and they write these female characters. And they put us all into this world of this male character that all ends up being very male. And I couldn't help but feeling in this particular case that this film just felt so much like a man was writing this and a man was telling this story. And sure, some of it may have been from Cédric's kind of youth or something like that. But even if it wasn't, it just felt so much like the hands of a male filmmaker were at work here. The way that the women acted and reacted and moved through things were done in a way where it really felt like not great storytelling, because it ended up making these female characters, especially in the relationships, like with Wendy, not authentic. She came across as something that a guy would write, saying, okay, he hurts her feelings, he yells at Martine and he yells at this other woman, but it's okay because he's struggling and he's going to get through it and then everything will be okay. But we lose the sense that it's sure, it's Xavier's story, but there are other people involved. And by kind of leaving it in that gaze, it takes away from the power of these other characters, and it hurts the film.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Andy. What a great point. And Isabel's apartment sequence is one great example that all of the lesbians in this sequence are like stereotypically lesbian, right? They're all hyper butch. You know what I mean? Like they all represent just sort of one category of stereotyped lesbian. And then we have one of the weirdest little sequences interjected in here that I think represents exactly what you're talking about, right? When you look at the male gaze as a sequence that defines women as the object of desire, which is the sequence in the, walking through the street of ideal proportions, the dance sort of sequence in St. Petersburg. Now, the Street of Ideal Proportions is a place in St. Petersburg. It is it's the Zodchego Rossi Street, and the street is known because it was designed such that the road itself is 25 meters across, and the buildings on either side are symmetrical at 25 meters high, and the length of the road is 250 meters long. And of interesting note, because I find it more interesting than the movie, I was talking to my wife about this, who has an academic background in Russian studies, and she said that's really interesting in St. Petersburg in particular, because even though Peter the Great was already gone at this point by a few decades, when this road was designed by this Italian architect in the 1820s, he had brought a whole bunch of international architects to St. Petersburg because he wanted it to feel like a real European city, not a Russian city. So St. Petersburg has all of these sort of remnants, and this is kind of the legacy. This architect, Rossi is the legacy of Peter the Great in St. Petersburg. I think that's really fascinating stuff. So I had a much better time looking up stuff about this than on this movie. But the sequence we need to talk about here is this woman. Her name. What is her name?
Celia.
Celia. This is Celia. The sequence we want to talk about here is Celia walking down the middle of the street. It's totally empty. The symmetry of the street is fascinating and beautiful and yellow and white, and the colors are very vibrant. But we're just behind her. She's just walking down the street, and she is wearing a short skirt, and she's kind of sashaying, and the camera is on her hips. It's just following her butt. And then it'll do the cutaways back to him behind her, Xavier behind her, and he starts doing this kind of interpretive dance. Every time we look at him, we see his body or his head, torso, his, doing his movement thing. Every time we cut back to her, we're behind her. Literally the male gaze that Xavier has looking at her down this street. I am not sure that this sequence added anything that was positive, in my view, of Xavier at all. What do you think?
Nope. Not at all. It was a very frustrating scene. I mean, I guess what he was trying to say is that, this is this street where it's all designed as perfection. And here's this woman that he's kind of put on a pedestal because, as he said earlier, she is like perfection. This is like the perfect woman. And so to that end, I guess it's his opportunity to kind of break out of it. But I don't know. It was a weird sequence. And it, for me, very much defined the male gaze and basically saying that that's kind of how Xavier is defining his life. And I don't feel like, he gets through this desire and this way of looking at the world, but I don't feel the film portrayed it in any strong way. This is still very much a story about this guy who lives by this kind of whole perspective where everything is going to fall the way that he needs it to because he's now in the right place for it to happen is kind of the way it works. This is an interesting point, and it's probably an interesting time to bring up a point that we didn't talk about in the first film, this idea when he kind of grabs Anne-Sophie and starts forcibly kissing her. And, after a moment, she kind of turns and initially she's not interested, but she kind of turns and it turns into this passionate affair that lasts for the entire year while he's there. But it is very much kind of forceful. And it is a trope about, the man who forces himself on a woman to the point where she's taken that she has to be with him. Ben Lott brought this up in our Discord channels about a point that we didn't talk about in the last film. And I think it's very relevant still with the sequence that you just brought up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I regret that we didn't bring that up. And I think there's so much of, when we watch movies like older movies like this sort of 80s and 90s and earlier, we have this trope of, no means yes, that, we just know if he's persistent enough, she's going to reveal her true feelings. And her true feelings are that he's irresistible and he's always going to be irresistible. That's how the trope works. And eventually they're going to have a passionate affair out of this whole thing. If he just holds on to her too long, if he just keeps kissing her around the face and neck, if he just. And that kind of the use of that trope is incredibly dated now. And I don't want to say in my defense, we should have talked about this because it really did. It strikes a chord. And it doesn't feel good to watch it today because, we're conditioned, rightly so, better than that. And so this was not a good example. And you're right. It's just now that we have this movie built on top of that, it's just more of the same. It's unveiling more of who this character is and how this character was written, not to take advantage of the beautiful and complex cultural tapestry that existed in the Spanish apartment without Xavier in it. But now we reveal that Xavier is a one-trick pony. He hasn't grown or learned, and he's still struggling with the basest of instincts of what it is to be the most stereotypical of men. And I'm finding that gross with every minute that sort of goes by.
It makes me wonder where we're going to go with the third film because clearly there's a lot of biographical stuff that Klapisch has kind of infused into these, or at least the first one. It ends up making me wonder, what is he really trying to say here? And is he this character who has this sort of view on relationships and everything? It just turns into a situation where it's not that healthy anymore. It's funny because I feel like when I watch L'Auberge Espagnole, I find, I don't know, maybe it's because I end up connecting so closely with Xavier through the beginning of that film. And when I see Anne-Sophie first kind of make those initial connections with him, I ended up feeling like I sensed her connection for him. And so I kind of was moving right along with kind of that relationship. And I wasn't surprised that when he kissed her, she started kissing back. But in retrospect, the more I thought about it after Ben brought it up in Discord, I'm like, it wasn't really that apparent of her to do that. And I really felt like I had been taken by Klapisch's male gaze as he made that film. And I didn't really find myself in a position where I was outside of that until that comment was made. And I was like, gosh, I really slipped right through that with him on that first film. And it's kind of uncomfortable to kind of look at it again and go, eesh, it doesn't work that well anymore. And it's a trope that does kind of need to end. People can find smarter ways to tell these stories.
Well, and here's the problem with that. There is both the issue of the trope being used in film to excess, and it was during a period, and we do less of that now. But there's this sort of metacognitive thing, right? Where how do we think about seeing these tropes in cinema? Are there characters who deserve to be able to play these scenes in film, right? Because there is room for characters who are overly aggressive with women and women who are uncertain about how they're going to. Is there a story that, that merits that kind of darkness? And I argue, yes, there is, of course. I can't think of any of those stories off the top of my head. I don't enjoy necessarily seeing it, but is there room for filmmakers and artists to create stories of all kinds? Yes, absolutely. There is. My question is this story Like, are we interested enough in Xavier to see him go through these things? Does this add to him as a character? Is this merited? Is it earned? And it is becoming less and less earned over the course of these two films now, that this character is somebody that I'm interested in following. That he exists in a world where so many other wonderful things are going on, and he is the least of those. And so to see him, treat women poorly doesn't add to him as a growing and healthy adult human being.
Well, I'm going to respond to your comment because I think it's a good question to ask. I think absolutely the stories can be told. Definitely have this sort of trope in a film, but then deal with it. That's how you do it.
Exactly. Yes.
It has to be something that happens, and then there's a response to that. If Xavier is going to act this way, really give us a solid story that answers that. And I'm sure there's a tricky way to do it in a romantic comedy that can still work. I mean, if you're putting it into the story in the first place, find a way for Xavier to get his comeuppance. And all of a sudden, he's going to be in a place where it's like, it becomes a part of the story. Absolutely, it can be done. And I think it challenges the storytellers to tell it in a way that it's going to work for us.
Then can we talk about the naked run through Paris?
I was hoping.
This is a different woman.
This is Neus, who we do meet at the very end of L'Auberge Espagnole. She's the one that he kind of connects with in the bar in Barcelona when he's having his going away party.
Yes, and it turns out she is fiery.
That's yes.
And fiery, I would say, is a descriptor used within the realm of the male gaze, because I can't imagine this sequence ever to happen in the world, ever. Can you please walk me through it?
Well, so they're having an argument, and it seems like they have a relationship that is very much kind of they're getting along, they're not getting along. In this fiery moment where they're not getting along, and apparently either before, during, or after a moment of sexual proximity, because they're both naked, she runs out of the apartment angry at him. He runs out after her, and they both happen to be naked. And they kind of, he chases her down in the streets. They're naked. He gets her, and they bring her. He brings her back to the apartment. And
they run, as far as we know, they run blocks. Like, it's not just, he makes it outside. They're at a full tilt sprint, completely naked, through the streets of Paris. Okay.
Right. And then he gets her, and then his line is, we had to go through this. It proved we were in love.
Barf.
Yeah. I struggle trying to figure out, is the director, is this like, what does he think love is? And I think this is where I got confused. Like, I can see the first film working really well because it's a person trying to figure out, who am I and what am I going to do with my life? I think that made a lot of sense, and it worked really well for that film. In this particular case, I feel like he's doing this search for love, and I feel like the storyteller just doesn't have a solid sense of how to make that work. And all of these things that are in Xavier's life, just none of them make sense. And I don't know if he's trying to compare it to the nonsense cliche version of what goes on in this sappy love story that they do, or if it's just bad writing. Or both.
And I would say architecturally, whatever you think of that parallel, because I think it's important that you said that there is at least the opportunity for a connection between what he and Wendy are writing, this cheesy soap opera, and what is going on in the film. And I would say architecturally, one of the central failings, if that is the intention, is that is not clear enough for sure, if at all, that there is some sort of gamesmanship going on here with the story. That it doesn't feel like what Xavier is going through is enough of that parallel in a way that's allowing us to watch him grow and transform throughout the course of the film.
Before we move on, I'm sure that we're going to talk about some other elements of cast and crew and whatnot, but I do just want to say, Notre Dame burned down just horribly not too long ago. There are a few shots in this, like when he's over at Celia's and he's looking out the window at the river, but you can see Notre Dame behind it, and a few other places where you see Notre Dame, and it just broke my heart. Every time that I saw Notre Dame in any of these shots here, just thinking about that and watching that fire burn on TV, it was very, very sad to see.
Oh, it was heartbreaking, truly.
Yeah.
The only person in the cast now, and we just in terms of the rundown, this is much more of an Audrey Tautou movie than the last one was. She's in this, enough to be interesting, if only still sidelined. Kelly Riley is back. She's fantastic as Wendy. Cecile de Francis Isabel, we talked about how great they were in the last movie. They're back. Kevin Bishop as William. He's transformed.
With a lot of hair.
Oh, with a lot more hair.
Cow.
Yeah. Evgenia Obraztsova as Natasha in Russia, the ballerina. She's great, although small part. Lucy Gordon as Celia Shelburne, the famous young 24-year-old generically famous person who wants to write her memoirs. She's a funny character. Gary Love. Aissa Maigaj as Cassia, who is the woman you mentioned at the very beginning, who shows up and is shocked, and that sort of incites the big blow up at Isabel's place, and she was also great. I think we don't get enough of her.
Yeah,
So
I liked her.
I really did. I think the women in general in this movie, the women in general in this movie were fantastic. I really enjoyed, all their supporting, the opportunity for supporting performances that could have been, stronger if they were given a better protagonist to play off of. I don't know. But Gary Love is the jerk, the Wendy's ex. And it turns out he has gone on to do some kind of interesting thing. He's directed a number of, or some episodes of The Following. He directed Sugar House with Andy Serkis. So he's an actor too. He's been in a bunch of stuff, mostly TV. And actually this movie is one of the more recent things that he did in terms of his acting career. But right now he's directing, he's directing, and it seems like he's got some interesting stuff going on. So Gary Love is a guy who might be worth checking out. His 2017 film, The Dark Mile, is a movie that I have not seen. Two women recovering from personal tragedy take a boat trip through the Scottish Highlands. Didn't do well on the IMDb star rating of 4.8, so maybe that's not one to watch. But
right.
But I do like The Following. That's a show. Speaking of bacon, so
he was an interesting performance, and actually. So I got 3 points left. He was a terrible, abusive boyfriend.
Terrible.
That Wendy had.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to gauge if he was so broadly written as kind of that abusive boyfriend that Wendy kept returning to because Klapisch needed to make and find a way to make Xavier seem like a much better alternative. Even though he's not. And so I'm like, is he too broad and cliche as just kind of the abusive boyfriend, just to make that fit? And it kind of frustrated me a little bit because then it just makes it, although I will say it makes it seem like, okay, well, if that's the type of guy that Wendy's falling for, she's clearly not too far from the mark if she's also falling for Xavier because she's really having a hard time finding men who are good.
Yeah, right.
So then I'm like, okay, maybe that is a point.
So if we begin from the perspective that it's her problem, the whole story changes.
I'm really curious to see how that actually continues as we get to the third film. My next point, and this is something, it's not quite related with what we were just talking about here. It's specifically about William and his marriage that, he gets married to he gets married to Natasha, and then at the wedding, I got a little confused because I'm like, what is Cédric trying to say here? Because William in the wedding photos, like he's struggling to smile, and then he's on the boat at the reception, and he's throwing up in the bathroom, and Natasha's just sitting there, and I'm like, is he trying to say that there are problems already with this relationship? I couldn't figure out what they were trying to do the way that this relationship was portrayed. And I'm like, from the beginning, when we find out William has fallen in love with Natasha, it's always made out like he's found the one. This is it. This is the final one in his life. He's going to be happy now. And then all of a sudden, all this happens. I'm like, what is going on with this relationship here? How did you read all of that?
Well, the line that I stick on is when he's in the bathroom and he says to Xavier, I'm just so happy. I'm just so happy. Like he's crying because he's so happy and he's upset that he's seasick and keeps throwing up.
But why was he having a hard time smiling during the wedding photos?
Okay, I'm with you. That's very confusing. The way I had to kind of interpret that was that he is not the kind of guy who is built for these big ceremonial things, and he was just tired of smiling and being a part of all of the pomp and circumstance that comes with a wedding. That's how I read it. But
they do kind of put that there because he's like stretching his face and stuff.
Yeah.
But still, I don't know. It's in there, and it ends up making me question like, what is going on with this relationship? It just all of a sudden spun it in a way that I just didn't think I needed it to go into.
It's kind of exhausting to feel like you have to work so hard to interpret every single character, like in a way that to rationalize it into your worldview. It's tiring.
My last point that I wanted to bring up, the whole analogy of Russian dolls that we end up getting toward the end of the film as he's kind of wrapping up his novel that he's writing in the bathroom. This whole analogy getting to, it's all about this idea of, at least according to Xavier, in his life, he sees it as all these women that he has to go through in his life are Russian dolls. And he keeps opening them, trying to find the one that's going to be the one, that last little one that you end up in the inside of this Russian nesting doll. And so I was thinking about that. I'm like, is that an analogy that we want to make? I wasn't sure how well I liked that kind of metaphor for his life and the way that he was going through women trying to find the one. How did that work for you?
Terribly. It did not play. And I don't know if it's that I am missing a cultural sensitivity, like there's some sort of idiomatic save that I need to count on from the French, that Russian dolls mean something different, but I didn't find it. And it did not play. It once again, it reduces the role of women and relationships in his life to effectively a puzzle or a toy. And I found that deeply disrespectful to the relationships that they were trying to write in this film.
Yeah.
I didn't care for it. What do you think of the puzzle at the end? Wendy is working on this puzzle, and it looks like it's quick. Where we have this knight, he's being knighted by a woman at the end, and she finishes the puzzle, and she says, "Xavier finished," and then they tilt down to the puzzle on the floor, and something that it was very important to her. She's been working on it throughout the course of the entire film. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I wasn't really sure. I was trying to find what that image was. From what I found, it's an image. It's a famous image of a knight being knighted. It looks like it's called The Accolade, if I'm finding the right one, by Edmund Blair Leighton.
Yeah.
I don't know. It says it's one of many paintings produced by Leighton on the subject of chivalry. I don't know what the point of that is as the puzzle that she's putting together here, or what they're trying to say. The only thing that I took out of it is my wife and I both walked out going, "We're going to say super bueno all the time now." Because that's Xavier's reaction to her finishing it. Super bueno. I don't know. I wasn't really sure what the point of that was. Finally the puzzle pieces in their lives are coming together. I don't know. It didn't work for me.
The ceremony, and I'm going off of Wikipedia here, and so begin to put this as a transparency on top of the film. In the painting, the ceremony is performed by a young queen. The knight bowed before her feet is in a position of submission and fealty. An audience is gathered at the queen's left, serving as witness to the ceremony. She is, is she sort of putting herself in the position of the young queen, that she expects loyalty and fealty, that she is somehow gratified that he came to his senses and came back to her after that disaster at the train, that she wants a more public sort of presentation of his loyalty? As I sort of you peel that onion and it gets kind of stinky.
It's an odd one to try finding a real connection. And
it's the last shot in the film, right?
Right. I mean, technically, it's kind of a mid-credit sequence.
Right.
It's a few credits, and then all of a sudden this kicks in. Like, here's the puzzle. And I was like, why is this here? It doesn't even need to be.
Yeah.
It was a frustrating follow-up to a film I enjoyed a lot more, and it ended up highlighting more some of the problems I had with the first film. So
that I didn't even know I had.
Kind of a frustrating experience all around with this one. And I'm a little worried with where we're going to go for the next one. I guess we'll see.
Any awards?
This film was not as well received award-wise as the first one. It had one win, 4 other nominations. The win was at the Caesar Awards. Again, Best Supporting Actress, Cecily DeFrance. She won Best Supporting Actress for this film.
Wow.
Really surprising, because I thought she was good in the first film, but in no way did I think she did anything more with this film that deserved that. What's interesting is Kelly Reilly was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but lost to Cecily DeFrance.
Wow.
Really question that. I think Kelly Reilly was the heart and soul. I think you look at that speech she gives at the train. I think that right there would have made me want to pick her instead of Cecily. The film also was nominated for Best Editing by Francine Sandberg, but she did not end up taking that one. It ended up going to The Beat That My Heart Skipped. But yeah, it wasn't quite as big of a film. So.
And at the box office, now the last week we learned that this, the Spanish Apartment was a big deal for Klapisch. Was this one a significant follow-up?
Well, certainly it kicked in budget-wise for him. He had a much bigger budget. Last time it was $5.9 million to do L'Auberge Espagnole. With this film, he had $10.7 million. And that's $13.1 million in today's dollars. So definitely a bigger budget to play around with. The movie ended up opening in France on June 15th, 2005. And it did well. I mean, this film found its mark. It made $23.4 million internationally. It ended up getting a release here in the States on May 10th. It was a Wednesday opening here, a limited release, very limited release in 2006, opposite Poseidon, Just My Luck, the Lindsay Lohan, Chris Pine film, and Goal, The Dream Begins, a little Disney sports drama. It was very independent. It didn't make a lot of money over here in the States, only $326,000, but it still was a success. All told, it made an adjusted gross of $29 million, and that landed it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $128,000.
Well, it's profitable.
Yeah. Gives him keeps his career going and gives him a chance to get around to the third film that he'll make. He's going to be doing his final film of this trilogy, the Spanish Apartment trilogy, in 2013, Chinese Puzzle.
All right. Well, I think we should just go ahead and get it out of the way and rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You can see all the movies we've talked about on this show. If you swipe over in your show notes and tap Flickchart, it'll take you directly to this movie where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up against ours.
First up, Russian Dolls or A Star is Born, 1937.
A Star is Born.
I'm going to take A Star is Born. Russian Dolls or A Star is Born, 1976. I'm actually going to go with Russian Dolls.
Okay.
Russian Dolls or King's Row.
King's Row.
The thing I will say that's going to affect my voting is Russian Dolls. Despite my issues, Cédric Klapisch knows how to make an invigorating, exciting film to watch. And I think that there's something to that. I probably would put Russian Dolls on before King's Row.
All right.
I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's right.
Well, and I'm not feeling terribly strongly about these right now, now that where we are in the set. So I can be swayed. I'll give that to you. Right. You're right. And okay. I deeply enjoy some of these characters and some of these performances. I really do. As much as I dislike our central character, I think they're good.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff going on around him. Russian Dolls or the Maltese Falcon? Absolutely. Maltese Falcon.
Yeah.
Russian Dolls or Infernal Affairs? I'll take Infernal Affairs.
Infernal Affairs, absolutely.
Russian Dolls or The Verdict? 100%.
The Verdict.
Russian Dolls or About Time?
About Time.
Russian Dolls or Princess Mononoke? I'm going to take the princess. Russian Dolls or Ocean's 12?
Ocean's.
Go with Ocean's 12. Well, that lands Russian Dolls at 250 on our chart out of 400.
That's
400. That was the 400th right there.
That was the
landing at 38%.
Well, it actually did better on our next reel chart than it did on my own. How'd it do on yours?
It did better on my own chart than it did on the next reel chart. For me, it landed at 1738 out of 4120, which is about a 58%.
Man, Flickchart destroyed this movie on my behalf.
Really?
It fell to 943 out of 1,079, which is a 13%. And if I go by the algorithm over at letterboxd.com/thenextreel, I should be giving this a half star. That feels egregiously low, even for a movie I don't like that much. Now, the question is it a 1-star movie? I think it's actually better than that. I think I could come in at 2 stars and not feel like it's getting away with too much.
That's where I'm landing. I'm at 2 stars, and I'm torn if I'm going to say I like it or not. I feel like I'm not going to give it a heart. I feel like I like it, but I don't feel like I'm going to give it a heart. Like, it's an easy watch. I could absolutely watch this again. No problem. I enjoy enough of the characters. I enjoy most of the story. I really enjoy the way that Klapisch puts a film together. It's just a really exciting, invigorating filmmaking. But having to hinge the film on a character that I end up really not liking really frustrates me. So 2 stars and no heart.
Yeah, I'm with you. 2 stars and no heart. It is definitely not heartworthy. And so I'm fine walking away from this one. It's not one I'm really going to go back to. But if I had to, I'd be doing it for, Isabel and Cassia and Natasha and Wendy. Yeah, those are the ones to care about. But this Xavier guy, yeah, let him go.
Well, let's. I guess we'll have to wait and see where we end up with him next week in the final film of this Spanish Apartment trilogy as we jump to 2013 and check it out on Chinese Puzzle. Maybe that's why we're ending with a puzzle. I don't know.
Maybe that's it. The British knights or French knights depicted in this puzzle are undoubtedly a nod to Chinese puzzle in the movie to come, I'm sure.
Well, everybody, if you want to hear more of us, but you can't wait until next week's show, check out our other show, The Marvel Movie Minute.
We're talking about the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time, starting with 2008's Iron Man.
You can support that show and all of our shows over on thenextreel.com/Patreon. where you can get access to also our exclusive members-only weekend show, The Saturday Matinee.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
Amazon has an opinion about this French film. And I know, even though we picked kind of low, and technically I think I was supposed to go with a 5-star. I was not able to do it. I found a 1-star that I needed to go with. And I feel like it teaches us a lesson beyond just that in the film. And I would like to present it if you don't mind.
Ooh, wow. That's exciting.
Bill gives us a 1 star, and the title of his review is Bad Would Be Undue Praise. Oh, Bill, where are you going? This was May 23rd, 2015. Bill says, I am a Francophile. This movie features a self-centered man-boy who abuses women. The language used is awful, although not untypical. Be glad it's not all translated and that the translations are not literal. France and the French are much nicer than shown here. Well, except maybe Paris. Now, I have to say, my experience with people in Paris is that it was just another big city. And if you've been to New York or San Francisco or wherever, London, you're going to find people that are big city people. But my French is apparently very rough because now I want this movie translated for me. Literally, if Bill says it is, all I can imagine is that it's the Quentin Tarantino of French movies now, this Russian Dolls romance movie. It's just foul. I can't wait to find that version.
Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah.
I'm very curious now too. Well, I went with a 5 star, and this is by RMM, who watched it a few years ago and provided some, I think, helpful advice for a 5-star review. This is the second film in a trilogy. See the films in order. My wife and I loved the series. But you have to watch them in order, apparently.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? This is the second one. I didn't know that. In a trilogy, you should watch things in order.
Wow.
But luckily, RMM is here to clarify for us.
Well, I'm just glad that he's here to clarify this for us, particularly because we're already doing this in order. It feels like, I now feel like we made the right choice. I know you and I went back and forth. Should we start with number 3? Maybe we start with number 2 and just roll the dice. But I think we made the right call.
I think people still question that with our David Fincher, Benjamin Button style series in which we did his whole career backward. But hey.
Those were the days. We would just hither and yon. We would do movies all over the place. Thanks, Amazon. It is hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great movies, so many great conversations. But it's a lot of work. Producing this show week after week does require a lot behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We had some great films in Season 8 that started their lives as books or plays, and you can find all of them on our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
That's the site where listeners can find links to purchase all the source material behind the adapted films we covered, from Season 1 up through our current season.
For part of Season 8, we had a series celebrating the 50th anniversary of films from 1968.
We talked about 2001 and 2010 for our Odyssey series, both adapted from Arthur C. Clarke's novels. Man, the second one was so much better than the first, right?
Don't you even get me started. Need I bring up Under the Cherry Moon again?
Yes, also so much better.
Wait, no, that's not what I...
Planet of the Apes kicked off its series based on the novel by Pierre Boulet.
We covered Danger Diabolic and The Detective, adapted from novels for our 1968 crime films.
Wait, wasn't that The Detective the prequel to Die Hard?
They were both written by Roderick Thorpe, and yes, it's the same character in the books.
I can't believe they even asked Sinatra if he'd be in Die Hard. That would have been weird.
Once Upon a Time in America was part of our Leone Once Upon a Time trilogy, adapted from Harry Gray's novel.
And we looked at 1968 Best Picture nominees The Lion in Winter, Rachel, Romeo and Juliet, and Oliver!
We also had an Ingrid Bergman series with adaptations like Spellbound, For Whom the Bell Tolls, Murder on the Orient Express, and Gaslight.
We haven't talked about Gaslight.
Stop gaslighting me!
Dive deeper into these books and more adapted films at thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports the podcast.
Get the full list of adaptations that we've covered on all the Next Reel family of podcasts and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.